Hello, thanks for clicking on this. We are so close to actually putting the turbocharger in this car. Right now, I've removed stuff, starting with the intercooler over here, so that I can actually access the front. We have the bumper sitting on the Miata, and most importantly, we have a bunch of brand new shiny parts, including a Borg-Warner turbo, a one-of-one downpipe, a one-of-one exhaust manifold, and some wastegate and blow-off valves. But in order to put that stuff in, we're going to have to modify this engine bay. We're gonna have to move stuff, we're gonna have to cut stuff, we're gonna have to, I'm actually not even sure yet. That's what we're gonna jump into now. So first I have to start taking this apart to test fit up the turbo parts. By the end of this video, we need to have the bay ready to actually run oil lines and install the turbo for good. So to get started, we'll remove the downpipe and exhaust manifold so that we can see how what we have fits in there. I'm using the Milwaukee M12 electric ratchet to remove this. If you've seen my old videos, I use a Husky electric ratchet a lot. This is an upgrade, but you really cannot do better for $50 on that Husky one, so I recommend them both. Just depends on how much money you want to spend. The links to tools are always in the description. I've been running this Megan racing headers for a couple of years now, both on this engine and on a B20 that I had in this car before. They're great. I'm going to sell them to somebody who wants it for an NA build, but they got to come out in order to fit up this exhaust manifold. There's no way I'll be able to fit this in to test fit it with the downpipe on, so I'm pulling that off. I'm using this extension that I think is pretty cool. It's flexible, not great for high torque situations, but definitely good enough to remove these hex head bolts. I'm going to very optimistically try to put this whole unit in there, but it's really not going to fit, so I'm just going to keep removing pieces from it, starting with the dump tube and then the wastegate and the turbo, and bench until it actually fits and I get a good idea of what's going to have to move in order to make these things work. All that actually fits in here is the manifold itself. The radiator on the left is in the way, and I've got it buttoned with just one bolt, but that means we get to check an item off the list. Something fits. Now to make something else fit, like the turbo, I'm gonna have to cut right here where I've drawn a circle, we're getting serious now, a big hole so that the turbo can fit through, and that's the sidewall of the headlight, and that's gonna come out too. Luckily that's just a couple 10 mils and a screw, and that's out, and we can start cutting. I wrapped this in masking tape so that I don't scratch the paint where I'm not cutting. I'm using a Milwaukee M12 hacksaw. Hearing protection is very important. I almost forgot that, but was quickly reminded by the horrible sound. I also tried the Ryobi drill with a hole saw on it. That turned out not to be the move, but I wasted some time learning that. And part of it that I couldn't really cut with the hacksaw, I did remove with a cutoff wheel on a angle grinder. That never lets me down. I use this Ryobi shop vac for cutting up the, holy crap, that's a big spider. Okay, anyways, I use this for removing all the metal shavings from cutting. Whenever I cut metal, I like to leave a finished edge. Since it's painted, I'm not going to paint this. I'm using this door trim, so that's not sharp anymore, and I have a nice big hole for the turbo to fit. And that is another thing off our list. The turbocharger, along with the manifold, now fit. The next problem to solve is that this fan and shroud are totally in the way of where the downpipe needs to go to connect to the exhaust. But no worries, because I have this SPAL, or SPL, so SPAL, low profile fan that's going to go in its place and leave room. First, we're going to have to take off this existing 30-year-old radiator fan. That should be no problem. Some bolts and a plug. And here is the side-by-side comparison of the old fan versus the new fan. As you can see, it is a lot thinner. I will have a link in the description to this fan in case you want to try it. So the next challenge, and probably the biggest challenge so far, is that this radiator is in the way. The wastegate goes right here, and it's not going to fit. As you can see, this is too big. It won't fit there. I taped up the manifold T3 flange, by the way, so that I don't drop stuff in there while I'm working. So as far as relocating this radiator, I don't have a lot of space on the left side, but I could put it diagonally. Maybe. It's possible. I've seen that done. I would have to still leave room for the fan and the downpipe. I could put the fan on the other side, but I would have to reverse the polarity if I do that. I have this bracket, like one of these ones, that was on the other side from when this was a full-length radiator. And I can try to use it on this side and maybe cut it, bend it, weld it, so that I can mount the radiator out a little bit. That's just one idea. I will have to change the way I mount the bottom of it too. It's currently welded. It has little welded feet on this traction bar. I can move the feet over here. I could also use that somehow, maybe. But first, I just need to remove the radiator entirely so I can move it around and try different locations. I have temporarily installed the downpipe and the turbo with just a couple bolts so that I can see how it fits. You can see that the turbo now would fit in that hole on the right, but the downpipe, of course, is still running into everything over here. So I'm playing around with the radiator to see where it might fit. I still have the hose on there. That could work. It doesn't look amazing. It leaves this gap. I want to cover that up with something. I'm also noticing that if the battery was not there, I would have more room. I would have to cut. Battery could go down there, maybe? Thoughts. Still working this out. To aid in my test fitting and imagination process, I'm just going to go ahead and pull the battery and give myself more room to move the radiator, move the battery around, and see what I can come up with. It's an iterative process. So I have the radiator free of any hoses and no battery, and this would totally fit. I can see how that would work. But I also had another idea, which is cutting this metal, just like I did on that side, to allow the radiator to fit straight into this gap, and then the radiator would still be straight. And I'm going to pull this headlight before I commit to cutting this, but I think I like that better, and then the battery could go back where it belongs. I'm pulling out this headlight and thinking more about it and decided that this is the way. So I'm going to tape this up and pull out my metal cutting tools again and make a slot for this radiator to slide into. I'm performing surgery with a cutoff wheel and the Milwaukee axle again. And I make a nice big hole and I'm going to wrap it with that same door trim stuff as before, but I also need to make some new feet for the radiator. They're going to be welded onto the traction bar, so I've cut a round edge here to mount onto the traction bar out of this 1-inch tube steel tube, square steel tube, and to drill a hole. This is where the feet of the radiator are going to sit into this after it's welded onto the traction bar, if you can imagine how that works. If not, I'll show you in a second. Alright, check it out. These feet with rubber grommets go onto these pegs on the bottom of the radiator. The rubber isolates vibrations. And with those rounded edges that I cut, you can see how they would slap onto the side of that traction bar. I just need to weld them on. But before I can weld on the feet, I need to cut off the old one and remove this tab that's kind of in my way. Then I'll prep the metal with this M12 Milwaukee die grinder to remove the paint so I have a clean surface that I can weld on. Then I will use magnets, these triangle magnets, to hold them on exactly where I need them after I've done my test fit, and simply weld them on. I find that these military surplus jackets can protect me from welding as well as they protect me from flying metal bits when I'm cutting, and they have a lot of pockets on them. Okay, everything's welded up. I have removed the turbo pieces and masked everything off so I can paint them so that they do not rust. Boom! They're painted. That will be my new radiator stands. So now the radiator is back in. Here is where I cut out before, again with that door trim liner, and you can see it tucks in and fits to give me that 1.5 to 2 inches. Here is the old mount That will be of no use anymore. And I had to cut off the nub that went on there in order to make that fit in there. I have this strap that I made. It is just a piece of steel strap I had laying around. I put a heat shrink on it. It's vibration dampening. But now everything should fit. I am open to making that look better if I come up with a better idea, but for now that does work. Now I have placed the turbo components back in. I would not call them installed, they're not torqued, they're not using all the bolts, but it's enough to say that officially the wastegate and dump tube fit. Now, as good as this dump tube, wastegate, and turbo fit, I cannot say the same yet about the downpipe. First, I need to wrap it in heat wrap, and I'm going to need to get a fan on this radiator to say that it actually fits. Okay, it's heat wrapped. I didn't film it. I think you can imagine how that worked. So back to the slim fan we talked about earlier. I'm going to cut the harness off of the factory fan so that this, and then wire it onto the slim fan so the slim fan can plug directly into the OEM harness. Then I'm going to grab my son, and because I need an extra set of hands for this, and we're going to put these funny zip ties that come with radiator fans through the radiator and to hold the fan onto the radiator. And when that's on there, we can actually say that the downpipe fits. That's it for this video. Stay tuned, subscribe for the next one where we will install the actual turbo stuff with gaskets. We're going to make intercooler piping, TIG weld it, we're going to weld up the exhaust, we're going to make oil lines for the turbo, and we're going to start it up and tune it. If you make it to the end of this video or any of my videos, I assume you're getting something out of it. I would love it if you left a comment and told me what you're working on, why you watched the video. I spend a lot of time to make these videos for basically the sole purpose of keeping these cars on the road and helping other people keep these classic cars on the road that I think we all love. So thanks for watching. Get off YouTube and go work on your project car.